So a few hours ago, we were given the big news about the Texans signing former Browns running back Nick Chubb to a 1 year, $2.5 million deal. And I like this move for the Texans. I tweeted out here, like the Nick Chubb signing by the Texans, low risk, very high reward on a $2.5 million deal. Just 2 years ago, Chubb was ranked the second best running back by PFF. The injury certainly derailed his career last 2 seasons, but I still believe he brings good value for a team worth the risk. I absolutely do believe that. Yeah, I mean, the last 2 years aren't really mind blowing because of again just two back to back serious injuries he's had. In the last 2 years, he's had 10 games played for over 500 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. He also added a receiving touchdown in that span as well. Averaged around I think 4.7 yards per carry if you add it together. If you want to look at the breakdown for the last the 2 seasons, 6.1 in 2023, though it's only 2 games, so not really a good sample size. 24, where he had 8 games for 3.3, which has been the worst on average for his entire career, starting back in 2018. But still, I like this move for the Texans because again, what I tweeted out there, I think he brings a very high reward if he can just get back to being healthy. I mean, if you're no one's going to be expecting Nick Chubb from 2022 and before that. I'm sorry, that is unfortunately long gone. Unfortunately, because of again the brutal injuries he suffered back to back in 23 and 24. But even with that, I view this maybe similar to Ezekiel Elliott, where he may not have a lot of rushing yards, but I think he may have a lot of touchdowns. He'll be your kind of your power back in short yardage, goal lines, formations. I think that's where he's going to bring a ton of value in there. And they can maybe slowly, as the season goes on, where they can take maybe some of the load off of Joe Mixon and kind of, I don't want to say official, be exactly 50-50, but at least try and, not have too much of a workload on Joe Mixon rushing. In 2024, Mixon had 245 carries for over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. So not to say the carries are going to be drastically down with Nick Chubb, but again, to save some, mileage on for Joe Mixon for the entire season and getting ready for the playoffs, which we do project, or at least I project them to make the playoffs, which we all should. So yeah, from that aspect of it, I like that signing for the Houston Texans. Again, very low risk reward, or sorry, low risk, very high reward. Bring him in here. The money is an absolute steal. Again, even if you are, if you're thinking of all the worst cases, if you think he's horrible at this point, $2.5 million is nothing really. Again, for what the value he could potentially bring. Even if you look at Ezekiel Elliott, like I said, for what he brought towards the end of his Cowboys tenure, the first go around, not looking at the second time this past year, but his go around with Tony Pollard, what he brought to the table, I think that is something reasonable you can look at for Nick Chubb in that aspect of it. So I like what they did there in getting help for C.J. Stroud and especially again for Joe Mixon at that point there. There was speculation for some part of it, for these months that maybe there was a return potentially for Nick Chubb and the Browns, but eventually they move off from, of course, drafting a running back early in the draft, early in the rounds, I should say, in the draft, and of course, inevitably moving off of Nick Chubb, kind of closing that door. If there even was a chance, I don't know how true that was. If there was truly a percent or a good chance of them reuniting and going back together in 2025, though I can't blame the Browns. Again, you look at the last 2 years of how brutal the injuries were, it's tough to bring a guy like that back when you have the uncertainty of, is there a chance a third straight year where something could happen and then you're sitting there with no options left like they've had been the last couple of years. So for the Browns perspective, I get why they didn't want to bring him back. It's unfortunate, like I said, because I think he up until 2022, that last year where he was really great, so you say his best career by far, statistically, he was one of the best running backs. He was a multiple Pro Bowler. I think maybe it's like 4 or 5 Pro Bowl selections. And again, he was fantastic. And it sucks that these last years have really derailed that career because I couldn't imagine if what these last years would have been fully healthy and what he could have done. I mean, at very least, he could have been maybe 1,100 yard rusher. So, I'm not projecting that at all with the Houston Texans, that he's going to be that. Joe Mixon will be the guy, and he certainly deserves that. What he did for the Houston Texans last year was certainly a vital part in an offense that really took a step back because of play calling, offensive line struggles, injury at the wide receiver position. So he definitely was a bright spot for C.J. Stroud, and I do expect that to be even more help from Nick Chubb. So, again, very great value of what they brought in for the Texans here. Again, low risk, very, very high reward here. Even if it wasn't for the Texans, I think any team that would have taken a chance on Nick Chubb certainly is for that money, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to give him the opportunity and to see what he can showcase. I mean, if a team is signing him to expect him to be the bell cow number one running back, that's being delusional. That is far gone at this point. But being a good complementary piece to a team like maybe the Colts with Jonathan Taylor, if you want to look at the Raiders, they have Raheem Mostert, but a good piece with Ashton Johnny. I mean, teams like that would be a great landing spot for Nick Chubb and a great running back too for a team like that. So we'll see how it plays out. Again, I'm very excited to see Nick Chubb and what he does with the Texans in 2025 and what he could showcase there. Hopefully, knocking on wood, that everything pans out. He doesn't have a third straight year of injuries, and he can showcase again. Not the elite Nick Chubb anymore, but being certainly a great running back too for a team, and I think he can certainly do that with Joe Mixon and the Houston Texans here.